Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top. On top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Well, welcome back to the Women on Top, everybody. I am so excited to be joined today by Madge Rumman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Blair Health, which is Canada's first AI-powered virtual clinic for midlife women's health, really built on this belief that every woman deserves fast, expert care without a 9-month wait list. And she was really a fintech veteran. And now she has turned into a femtech founder. So she left this thriving fintech career to solve one of medicine's most overlooked problems, which is menopause. So Madge, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I would love to begin with this idea of menopause because quite honestly, I had never even thought about it, really heard much about it, talked about it. And now it's such a hot topic, especially in women's health right now. And so what is this specific health issue that kind of became such a passion point for you? Can you kind of walk us through why did you kind of get hooked into this idea around specifically menopause and women's health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to dig into that. So this started off as a bit of a passion project for me. So as you explained through your intro, I came from a fintech background. So women's health really was not on my radar in any way. And then when I had my kids who are still very young, so 4 and 2, my eyes were open to how deeply underserved women's health needs are. And what I found is that there's a lot of focus on the earlier parts of a woman's journey. So pregnancy and fertility, and then nobody talks about, what happens after. So 35 plus. And really the drive behind menopause is larger than menopause itself. It is really driven from access to specialized care. So menopause is the only medical condition that impacts 100% of 50% of the population. And really what it is that it's natural aging. So as women grow, the estrogen levels tend to fall with time. So that overlaps with your fertility going down after the age of 35. And then every woman is on her own different journey to get to menopause. So perimenopause could be a period that could last up to 8 years. And then menopause starts after that. So there was no better problem to solve. And the problem that we're solving for is also much larger than that, because the reason why it's very difficult to get care for menopause is because there are very few specialists who specialize in mature women's health. And wait times to see them is very long. And then in that time, you're sort of sitting there, you're waiting, you're confused, you're trying to get access to information. So we have built a company that makes the process of getting care very quick and also evidence-based. So we've taken the knowledge of a specialist and then we've built a system that allows generalist providers to provide that specialist level care at scale.
Wow. That's this is a huge problem to solve. So I want to just go back a couple things that you said. You said this is a problem that affects, did you say 100% of people?
Yeah, 100% to 50% of the population. So 50% of the population is female, and every female, will go through this. And fertility is a very important time in a woman's life. People are having fewer children, so it's still very impactful. But this is the only condition that will touch every single woman. It's just a natural aging process. So there was no bigger problem to solve as far as the impact. And then it tends to be very understudied because all of the funding and all of the focus is going into the earlier parts of a woman's journey, which is, trying to have a baby and support around fertility as well.
So you were in a completely kind of different industry. What was that shift? What was like a couple of those moments for you that you thought, you know, yes, I need to go after this. I have to solve it. Like, as you articulated, this is a really big problem, but there's a lot of really big problems in the world. And so I'm just curious, like, what was that spark, that moment in your mind that made you realize this is the thing that I'm going to pivot towards, that I have to put my energy towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been really lucky to work at incredible fintech companies in a head of product capacity. And I started my first startup job was at a company that did buy now, pay later in Canada, which was acquired by a company that does the same thing in SF. And that was really an incredible journey and, gave me the opportunity to be exposed to building companies, building products, and then having them succeed at scale. And then I worked at another fintech also based in New York that had a very important mission, which is democratizing access to wealth, specifically commercial real estate, private equity. So it was sort of an experience that opened my eyes to the idea of access and how people who come from certain backgrounds and sometimes women, don't have access to the same financial wealth and like resources. So I found that mission very inspiring. And I knew that I wanted to start my own business, but I was sort of in search of a problem that I felt really mattered. And the reason why I decided not to pursue something in fintech was because I sort of felt that I became an expert in it, that I knew so much to the point where I almost couldn't be creative. And sometimes, not knowing anything allows you to start from scratch and think about solving a problem in a more creative way. And health was always on my radar. It's something that I was very interested in. But I had noticed that the standards for technology in healthcare are much lower. In fintech, we were processing crazy volume. We had access to the latest tools. Investment in AI was really high. And then when it came to health and in other industries, and then specifically women's health, people with my background tend to shy away from those problems. So I thought, hey, if I can apply what I learned in fintech and like bring it over to a different industry, and get at a problem that really helps people, I think that that's a problem that excites me and really gets me up in the morning. And then specifically on that menopause piece, when we actually peel back the layers of why that is the case, that it's so hard to get access for this, what we discovered was that the problem isn't, menopause per se. It's not the fact that menopause is hard to treat. And it's not a new condition. It's like literally a condition that has existed since the start of time. It's a broader system access issue. And that system access issue is a healthcare bottleneck. And it's a very big problem. It's a problem that's, extremely complex. And then it also requires you to like build an application and then build something where patients can easily access that. And those types of applications, unfortunately don't exist in healthcare.
Interesting. It makes sense to me that you kind of used what you were so good at. Like, you used your talents, but you just kind of like reapplied them to something that, like you said, spoke to you in such a different way, which I think is kind of a great way. We were just talking a little bit before the podcast began recording about sometimes, making a pivot. Like, how do you, kind of give yourself that permission to change and maybe choose to go in a different path, whether it's a life path or a career path. And I think that's a great way to kind of share with the listeners that maybe a good way to do that is to look at what you're currently good at and what are those skills that you can then apply to whatever your next adventure is going to be somehow, some way. And it seems like that's exactly what you've been able to do with this. I'm curious what you've learned along the way about menopause that maybe you hadn't expected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I learned about it is just how little women who are not in that phase, spend thinking about it. Right. So, I sort of, did this at a time in my life where, I'm, having babies and this is many years away for me. And what I learned about this is that we're really taught very little about it as women. And that lack of knowledge on the patient side is sort of a part of the problem because there are so many symptoms that are associated with it that happen in the perimenopause period that tend to be overlooked. And they're not just overlooked by providers, they're sometimes also overlooked by the patients themselves. So some of those things on the medical side are like the impact of sleep. When your estrogen levels start to drop, your sleep gets disrupted. That also impacts mood. It impacts, how you're feeling. And it also happens at a time where it could be as early as your late 30s to early 40s, where you have the most amount of work on your plate. Like you're in the most senior jobs. Most people are, manager plus in that age category in the workforce. They've had a kid or two, so they've gone through the exhaustion of pregnancy and fertility. And they're also taking care of aging parents. So it tends to happen at a time in life, which is exactly midlife, when also your responsibilities are piling up. And one of the things that I learned is that, not having access to information really delays getting the right answer. So one thing that we built at Blair Health is that we have the clinical portion of our app. So you can go in and get specialist level care right away. We do assessments right away. But we made sure that we have all of this information in the app. And where the information is incredibly helpful is actually in that perimenopause period. So we do personalized assessments. So you're able to go in, create an account, and then what we do is we instantly diagnose the stage of menopause that you are in. So you could be in premenopause, in your core fertility years. You could be in perimenopause. You could be somewhere in between menopause or postmenopause, and we'll tell you right away. And that has really inspired how we've built Blair Health. Is we want to give you clinical information that is personalized to you right away, so that you're not stuck in a vacuum, just looking for information and figuring out what's going on with your body.
Yeah, I think that's huge right now, especially from what I'm hearing, is that women, there's so much information out there. Like it's information overload so often. And I think people are really looking for that resource of like, how can I get something that's personalized, that's very specific to my needs and to what I'm looking for, to make sure that maybe I'm just even helping to prevent things down the road. And what kind of path can I take? And so I think that's great that you've been able to design something that's able to reach women where they're at in that space. I wonder how you feel now, like being a CEO of this company and comparing to what you were doing in fintech. Was there kind of a part of yourself when you were in that other world that didn't feel quite aligned with your truest self, I guess? Or, kind of what are some of the differences there now looking back from where you are today?
I'd say the biggest missing piece was the impact piece. So when I was in fintech, finance and access to financial resources has the ability to impact everybody's life. And you really learn a lot about the creation of wealth and how wealth is distributed. So this was an experience that I learned as the head of product at a company called Cadre. So we were focused on commercial real estate, private equity, and like democratizing access to everybody. I saw there that, the company was really built around how lack of access to those resources creates multi-generational wealth gaps. And what we also learned there is that those gaps are even larger for women. And that was sort of something that, really stuck with me. We had a product that, it was really meant to help bridge that wealth gap. But the more that I looked at the problem, the more that I felt that what was really missing in fintech is really that impact piece and like a business that really helps people. And before that, I was also in payments, and payments is great. It's like the way you pay for stuff. It's like exciting. It's like e-commerce. It's in store. It touches every aspect of day to day life, but it didn't really have a very strong impact piece. I can't say that we were like, changing lives by having people paying for their shoes or, it's certainly helpful to like pay over time, but I don't know that it had that, life-changing impact of, hey, we're doing something that changes lives. At Blair Health, I can confidently say that we do, right? And I also think it's possible to build a business that helps people, and technology has an incredible ability to be able to close those access gaps that, unfortunately disproportionately impact women. But it's also possible to build a thriving, growing business that is centered around this idea of helping people. Those two concepts shouldn't conflict with each other. And at Blair Health, we're on the path to proving that those types of business models can exist and can do well. You can help people and you can create, a big thriving business around those missions.
What a testament to, like you said, that both can exist. I think that's really important for people to hear that message. I wonder, you've talked a little bit about perimenopause. You've kind of said that term here and there. And curious if you can kind of share a little bit more about what that is. Again, I don't feel like we're talking about it much, especially in our 30s. I feel like it's something that we talk about menopause down the road when it starts affecting us, when the symptoms start really getting crazy. So, kind of when did you first realize that perimenopause was really important for us to pay attention to? And from what you know now, what are some of those things that maybe we, women who are in their 30s should be keeping an eye out for, should be aware of? Give us some of the tips that you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So the first thing that I would recommend is that if you're thinking about it, you don't need to think about it. Go to Blair Health and do the assessments. We make that part of our flow actually free for all. The reason is because we want to give you access to personalized information right away, and we believe that every woman should know where she is in her journey. So, like I said, you can go in and complete the menopause stage assessment for free, and we'll tell you right away, where you are in your journey. So on the medical side, the first thing that I would mention, and my co-founder, her name is Dr. Lindsay Sheriff. She's only one of 8 subspecialists in Canada. So she's taught me a lot about this. So I probably know more than the average person, but she would be sort of the expert on the medical side. But specifically on perimenopause, what I've learned is that this is the period leading up to menopause. So menopause is when you haven't had a period for 12 months plus. Perimenopause is sort of like the in-between phase. So what ends up happening is that your estrogen levels start to decline. And the symptoms that are associated with that could be things like brain fog, trouble sleeping, and then also the cycle changes. So periods could get closer together. The flow could change, and it varies, woman by woman. And then it also tends to overlap with reduced fertility after the age of 35. So after the age of 35, it might take longer to get pregnant. So that is also, related to your estrogen levels dropping there. And one of the biggest misconceptions actually about it is that you need a blood test to determine if you have perimenopause. That is actually one of the biggest misconceptions that we see. And that's not how it's diagnosed. It's really diagnosed based on clinical observation, meaning the symptoms that you see is what dictate whether, that phase has started for you or not. But we see a lot of companies, take blood draws to say, oh, your hormones look this way on Tuesday, they look that way on Friday. And that's not really helpful. Symptoms is really what drives whether or not you have entered that period. And yeah, like the things that I mentioned, so trouble sleeping, mood changes, your period change. Like you could still be having a period, but then you might miss a few. So those are some of the things that would indicate that somebody is in perimenopause.
I feel like the assessment is a big piece here because that's kind of a way for women to start to tap into, has this started happening? Has it not? Kind of where am I at, in terms of the phases here. And then, okay, so walk me through, you take the assessment and then ideally what happens next? You work with somebody through the app to get, connect with a specialist, or what's the next step?
Yeah, so our flow is really simple. So you can go in and create an account for free. The first thing that we ask for is the menopause stage assessment. So it takes less than 2 minutes actually to complete, and then we're able to tell you what phase that you are in. But we'll also give you information about that phase, like common symptoms, what to expect. And then you move on, and then you do the second part of our flow, which is something called the health and wellness assessment. So basically, the way that this is structured is that it replicates the experience that a specialist would do with a patient in an in-office setting. It looks at any current medication that you are on. It looks at your genetic history. So there are certain things that will impact whether or not you're eligible for menopause hormonal therapy, MHT, which used to be called HRT. And then after you complete the health and wellness assessment, what we do is we can instantly generate a treatment plan for the patient that is very nuanced and personalized. Now, this will let our patients know right away if, for example, they're eligible for MHT. It'll also have, non-hormonal options, supplements, and things that you can take. But everything that we will show is evidence-based and specialist-led. And then you are able to meet with one of our providers on the platform right away. So within the next day. Now, that provider isn't just a regular provider. It's a provider that is empowered with, we call it super technology. So on the back end, they can see all of the results of your assessments, anything that is impact for the kind of treatment plan that you get. And the patient and the provider will meet with all of this information pre-done, and they're able to walk through the ideal treatment plan. And then the other part that is really unique about Blair Health is that we're really big on this idea of preventative care. So we're building a platform that goes above and beyond your first appointment with your doctor. Especially with verticals like perimenopause and menopause, the journey could look different for each woman. And, it could be 8 years, it could be, 2 years. And what we also do is we track your symptoms. And that will help us, figure out that the plan that you're on is really the best plan for you. And then above and beyond that experience, you also have unlimited messaging with the provider that you met with. And then you have access to articles and resources that are written by the clinicians on the platform. So we're really putting clinical information in the hands of every customer with the idea that this plays a critical role in preventative medicine. So as an example, somebody could have bleeding after they have a period, after their periods have stopped. And that's a sign that they need to get screened for cancer. So we're able to flag those things in the platform, but we do it in a way where we empower the patient with the knowledge to be able to put up their hand and say, hey, something is changing with my body. I really need to get this checked out.
I like how comprehensive it is too. It really includes so many resources. Like you said, you're kind of putting the power in the patient's hand. You're making it so accessible. I'm curious, why is it not currently as accessible? Why has this become such a challenge, especially for women? And, I've heard a lot, and to some extent have kind of felt this myself, but where you get dismissed for some of these symptoms, like these are, you get passed off very easily. So what is the disconnect? What's been going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really at the heart of what we're solving at Blair Health, which is the knowledge that primary care providers have on the topic. So in Canada, what we have seen is about 80% of cases, so you go to a primary care doctor, about 80% of cases get referred to a specialist. The problem is that there are very few specialists, which creates this really big backlog of patients just waiting. And then primary care providers receive, they're truly trying their best, and we really build a system that's a part of the solution. But they are overburdened with a population that's, very diverse with very different, with very different needs. So they receive very little to no education. And in the US, there is one menopause specialist for every 32,000 women. Yeah, which is really, really wild. So it's a massive, massive shortage. And then those shortages tend to be even bigger outside of the main states. And it results in wait times, but it results in exactly the experience that you described, which is that you go to your primary care provider and, you get dismissed and you get told, oh, you're too young, or, this is probably just mood, or, this is probably just fatigue, and so on and so forth. Um, and that's really where you see the biggest disconnect. It's really in that primary care layer. And at Blair Health, we have built a platform for the provider. So we believe that the problem cannot be fundamentally solved by having like a virtual health platform. So what we do is we have built that layer of specialized knowledge on our back end, where a generalist provider, so somebody who has received no knowledge in the vertical that we offer, so they could be somebody who has no experience in menopause, and they can come to our platform, and they can provide that specialist level care um, right away. And that's exactly what we're solving for. It's that provider experience, empowering them with the knowledge so that they're able to go in and see patients at scale.
Gotcha. I was going to ask, how do you solve for the specialist issue where you are offering all of these specialists if they're not so that makes sense, is that you're actually giving the knowledge to your clinicians and to your providers to be able to then share that with the patients. And that's kind of how you're.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that tool also looks on the provider side is that we have really doubled down on the provider experience. So if you think about all of the efficiencies that AI can deliver for the for the provider, that's like notes summary, that's making sure that when they meet with a patient, they already have all of this information in hand. And that's been a game changer for us. We don't think that you can solve the problem just by refactoring how medical schools are done and how residencies are taught. But you can allow those incredible providers who work so hard to have a better workflow, a smarter workflow that can allow them to deliver that specialist, led experience. And it leads to a better clinical outcome, because what the studies have shown is that patients that are more informed, that arrive prepared to an appointment, that ask the right questions, get a better clinical outcomes than those that are less informed. And the reason why that quality of clinical care is higher with Blair Health is because we control all of the inputs, meaning we ask all of the relevant questions that are relevant for the treatment plan that you're going to be getting. And that really reduces the source of error. And then that way, when you meet with a provider, your time is not spent collecting clinical data, getting the history, but it's really spent agreeing on a treatment plan and explaining, the risks and benefits of different treatment options.
Have you seen some really just amazing outcomes from this? Like, what are some of the stories that you hear on the other side? What are some of those things that just help keep you going, in times that are really challenging?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So I think the biggest thing from a mission perspective is being able to provide access to communities that are very deeply underserved. So we've had some of our first patients in states like Oklahoma in the U.S. where there's only 2 menopause specialists, and the wait times there are very long. And we've had patients who come to us exactly saying, "Oh, I was dismissed. I've been waiting for 2 years to see somebody, and I came here." And somebody took care of me right away. So the most moving part is always the impact on the patients who are saying, I got to Blair Health, I was able to get the right treatment, and now I feel like myself again. And it's so exciting to hear that feedback directly from women, not just the fact that they got a treatment plan, but how that has impacted their lives.
I'm sure it's so rewarding to, have not just built something that is successfully operating, but then to hear those stories on the other side. And that's really the mission that you were looking to fulfill, is how can we help this whole population of women that is being, like you said, so underserved and so unmet in their needs. And I'm kind of also hearing that there's such a strong link to mental health as well, it seems like. So I feel like a lot of these women probably maybe have been, I don't know, I'm just surmising, but have been struggling with mental health just because it's been so hard to find care. And some of the symptoms probably make them feel, like you said, not like themselves. So I wonder if you're noticing that there's a direct link between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And mental health is also on our radar. So we're a multi-vertical company. So we do have a menopause, perimenopause vertical. We have urology and clinical nutrition as well, already live on the platform. And our mission is to close the specialist gap in all of those verticals. And you're absolutely right; they tend to be very positively correlated, and very correlated. And it's also the longer that it takes to get care, the worse that your mental health impact is. And even simple things of even if you strip out the menopause factor, and if you just look at what happens to people when they don't sleep well, what happens to you when you're like unable to perform at work. Those are all things that are very closely tied with mental health and how you feel about yourself. And at Blair Health, we have incredible providers who have experience talking to patients who are going through a really tough time. And we're actively growing the business and adding more specialized verticals that exactly how you described it, look at the overlap between midlife and mental health. And we're able to provide those specialist resources to women in that life phase.
That's so wonderful to hear that you're thinking differently and like growing into that as well. We're starting to hear more about, menopause and things like this are coming more to fruition and coming into the light. But I'm wondering, why has it been so hard to talk about? What is it that blocks us from sharing about menopause and perimenopause? Is it shame? Is it beliefs behind it? What do you think has been preventing us from having these conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think part of it is like, I remember when my mom went through the journey and you just don't talk about it. I think it's just taught as like something that sort of happens to women. So some of it is, sort of how the generation that has gone through it has handled it, is that there's a lot of like, you just kind of, keep it under wraps and like, you keep going. There's likely an element of aging and sort of like how society puts so much pressure on women and the way that women look, whether it's like weight or aging, where, women are just expected to look great all the time. So, some of it is like associated with that. Is like maybe there's an element of shame around, talking about the aging process, which is really what menopause is. Um, I think there's medical reasons as well. It's understudied. Um, and I think so much funding went into other aspects of a woman's journey, fertility, and not enough probably went into the later years of life, perimenopause and menopause. And it's so great that all of this is changing, and there's a lot of companies in the venture uh, circles now that are venture-backed companies that are specifically focused on midlife. And it's like one step at a time. The first step is, now it's getting a lot of media attention, and that's great. And then the second part of the change is, what do you do about it? And is there enough funding, flowing into companies that are trying to change how you talk about it and how you treat it? And then I think the last piece is just the role that employers play. And I think from a sales cycle perspective, you kind of see those trends of, oh, one day it's super popular to support women in the workplace. The next day there's another, big initiative, going on. That, at, and at Blair Health, we believe that employers have a huge role to play here. And more support is generally needed for women in the workplace.
There's a lot that I'm sure you're coming across as far as barriers and hurdles and all kinds of different things that you maybe didn't even expect going into this.
I for sure did not expect. I will say it was a lot easier building in fintech than in women's health, and some of those barriers just don't exist in fintech. And the flow of funds and the opportunities and the number of businesses that are being built in those spaces are really different.
It does seem as though right now, who is being drawn to femtech are those people who should be in that world because they just are so passionate about it. And they really are seeing, what that mission is. So hopefully that's what we continue to see, but even more fruitful in terms of the talent that gets brought to that table. So
yeah, absolutely. And we always say at Blair Health, we're a femtech business for gender diversity in the company as well. So it's always easier to work at a company where you can relate, to the mission, but like guys can come and like build with us too. And we've had a lot of support. It's been like incredible to see, whether it's like partners or like investors or people outside of like a traditional background that you think would normally care about women's health issue actually come and be part of what we're building here.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is really neat to see, I'm sure, on your side as a founder of like, wow, there are people who deeply care about this. And it's kind of this plethora of individuals and backgrounds and cultures and all different things. So it's going to certainly take all of us to move the needle and to continue to move the needle. But I'm glad that your company is so dedicated to this. And I hope you continue just to see so much success. I want to just share that we have a closing tradition on this podcast where I ask the guests that I've been interviewing to leave a reflection or a quote or just something that's on their mind that they want to share for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So what I'd like to do is to share what was left for you and then give you the opportunity to do the same. So the last guest shared, no matter how much is on your plate, no matter how hard life can be or the fear that can be in the world, know that it's time to celebrate everything that you've accomplished and to make some time for fun as well.
Wow, that's almost serendipitous for me because I actually think that that's the biggest thing that I've been trying to work on is like I tend to get very busy. And, as an entrepreneur, you meet a lot of headwind and it's really, really hard. But I was telling my team, we don't spend enough time celebrating everything great, that has happened to the business. I think pausing to like reflect and like be grateful, but also, have the celebration is something that I'm actually actively, working on. So I'm happy that that's what the last guest has shared. What I would share with the next guest, let me think about this one. I think it would be that there is no perfect time to just go for it. And there's always going to be a reason not to do something. And I think to pursue an entrepreneurship journey, you have to be very stubborn and you have to be willing to take 50 no's and just ignore them and charge through. So my advice, or if I could leave anything, it would be that don't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment and the perfect time is never going to come. And just make a decision and go for it and see what happens.
That is perfect for this conversation. And I'm sure whoever I interview next, that will land so well. Thank you for following what was on your heart. Thank you for continuing to build such an amazing platform for women. Thank you for your advocacy for women's health. I'm excited to see what's to come for Blair Health. So we'll be on the lookout and we'll be paying attention to everything that you create and do. And certainly we'll share links in the show notes for listeners as well, since you're going to want to go check it out, maybe take their assessment and pursue some of those resources. So Madge, thank you so much for being here. It's been really great to learn more about you and about what you're creating.
Amazing. And thank you so much for having me and giving us the platform to talk about Blair Health. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.